Have you ever felt like the more you think, the more isolated you become? The more you understand, the fewer people are willing to listen. It's not just in your head. This is something society has always feared, not because deep thinkers are wrong, but because they see what others are too afraid to face. Throughout history, brilliant minds have often been ridiculed, silenced, or ignored, not for their lack of intelligence, but because they dared to confront uncomfortable truths. From Socrates, who questioned the status quo in ancient Athens, to Galileo, who was condemned for proving that the earth revolves around the sun, these intellectuals challenged deeply held beliefs that many weren't ready to accept. Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest philosophers of the 19th century, argued that intelligence is a curse. He believed that those who see the world too clearly are destined for loneliness, because their insights force others to face their own ignorance. But why does this happen? Why does society resist those who think differently, who question the accepted norms and offer new perspectives? To answer this, we need to look deeply at human psychology. When you encounter someone who is physically stronger, you might admire them or feel a sense of respect. You might even feel inspired by their strength. When you meet someone wealthier than you, there's a tendency to feel envy, but you don't necessarily feel threatened by them. But when you encounter someone intellectually superior, something strange happens. Psychologists have identified this reaction as the mirror effect, the phenomenon where deep thinkers not only introduce new ideas, but they also reflect back the limitations of those around them. This mirror effect can create discomfort because it forces others to confront their own shortcomings. And that discomfort often results in a defensive reaction, resistance, denial, or even hostility. Why does intelligence provoke such discomfort in a way that physical strength or wealth do not? The answer lies in how intelligence is tied to our identity. Unlike physical strength, which is something external that we can admire or strive to emulate, intelligence is much more personal. It's a part of who we are. It shapes our beliefs, our worldview, and the way we see ourselves. When we meet someone who questions our deeply held beliefs, who challenges what we take for granted, it can feel like a direct attack on our sense of self. Instead of admiring intelligence, many people subconsciously resist it. They don't resist because the deep thinker is arrogant or dismissive, but because the thinker's very presence forces them to confront their own limitations. It's not just about being right, it's about what being wrong feels like. This dynamic has played out throughout history. Intellectuals have often been pushed to the fringes of society. Their ideas don't just challenge the status quo, they challenge the ego. And human beings, by nature, will do almost anything to protect their ego from discomfort. Reflect for a moment. Have you ever tried to introduce a deep or complex idea in a casual conversation, only to be met with blank stares or awkward silence? Have you ever noticed how people quickly shift topics when discussions move beyond surface-level chatter? This is not a coincidence. This is a defense mechanism. When people encounter a deep thinker, their minds automatically go into self-preservation mode. Instead of being curious or engaging, they resist. They push away the uncomfortable truth that someone else's thoughts challenge their own. This is why deep thinkers often feel isolated. Not because they lack social skills, but because their intelligence makes them stand out in a world that values fitting in over standing out. Interestingly, studies show that confidence is often more valued than intelligence in social settings. People are naturally drawn to those who project certainty, even if their ideas are shallow or simplistic. Charismatic leaders, motivational speakers, and viral influencers thrive by telling people what they want to hear. They offer comfort, certainty, and simplicity. Meanwhile, those who challenge commonly accepted beliefs or question mainstream narratives often struggle to find a broad audience. This is the paradox of intelligence. The more someone seeks truth, the more they become disconnected from the majority. The mirror effect does not just reflect society's limitations. It reveals why society resists change in the first place. But is this fear of intelligence just a psychological phenomenon? Or is there something more? Modern neuroscience backs up this observation. Studies show that when people feel intellectually inferior, the brain's amygdala, the region responsible for fear and threat detection, becomes highly active. In other words, deep thinking doesn't just make people uncomfortable. It triggers a primal survival response, similar to what we feel when facing danger. But why does intelligence, in particular, activate these fear circuits? The answer lies in the evolution of human psychology. For most of human history, survival didn't depend on being the smartest person in the room. It depended on being accepted by the group. Our ancestors thrived in social groups where cooperation meant safety and rejection meant vulnerability, even death. This is why human brains are wired for social acceptance rather than intellectual pursuit. When a highly intelligent person enters a social setting, they disrupt the balance of the tribe. Their presence challenges existing ideas, social norms, and group dynamics, which triggers the brain's defense mechanism. It's as if the deep thinker is not just an individual, but a threat to the social order. If intelligence is such a powerful gift, why does society often ignore or suppress those who display it? Why are deep thinkers, those who question, challenge, and dig beneath the surface, so often left out of the inner circles of influence? The answer lies not just in individual psychology, but in the architecture of modern civilization itself. Let's start with the education system. From a young age, we are taught to obey instructions, memorize content, and regurgitate what we're told. Original thinking is rarely rewarded. Instead, what earns praise is alignment. Alignment with authority, with the textbook, with standardized rubrics. This isn't accidental. Educational systems were historically modeled after industrial factories. They were designed to produce workers, not philosophers. In such a system, the goal is not to help you become yourself, but to help you become useful. But useful to whom? To the systems in place, to economies, to power hierarchies. A deep thinker who questions the entire structure doesn't fit into this mold. And because they don't conform, they're seen as disruptive, even dangerous. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently." This quote cuts deep into the heart of the issue. We are taught to value sameness over difference, consensus over challenge. But when consensus becomes the highest goal, truth becomes secondary. Now ask yourself, in your school years, how often were the most curious students encouraged to go deeper? And how often were they told to just stick to the curriculum? How many times were weird questions dismissed for the sake of keeping the class moving? Over time, these subtle cues train people to fear being different, to hide their questions, to trade curiosity for social safety. This creates a world where shallow conformity is rewarded and deep insight is exiled. But it doesn't stop there. Social structures, from families to corporations to entire governments, replicate this model. In families, children are often praised for being obedient rather than inquisitive. In corporations, employees who follow the script climb faster than those who challenge assumptions. In politics, Leaders who appeal to emotion and certainty win votes more easily than those who promote complexity and nuance. And so we grow up in a world that trains us, consciously or not, to prioritize belonging over understanding. But here's the dark irony. Belonging that is based on conformity is fragile. It requires constant self-censorship, suppression of doubts, and rejection of one's inner complexity. As Carl Jung pointed out, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But in a world designed to filter out difference, that privilege is often denied to those who think deeply. Let's consider a simple but powerful scenario. Imagine you're in a meeting. The room is filled with nodding heads, everyone agreeing with the proposed plan. You see a major flaw, one that could lead to long-term damage. Do you speak up? In theory, you should, but in reality, most don't. Because being the one who breaks the flow carries a social cost. You risk being labeled difficult, negative, or uncooperative. This is known as pluralistic ignorance, a psychological phenomenon where everyone privately disagrees, but publicly conforms because they think they're the only one. So when a deep thinker speaks up, they expose the illusion. And illusions are valuable to fragile systems. That's why, more often than not, these thinkers are marginalized. Not because they are wrong, but because they disturb the artificial peace. This leads to an even more uncomfortable question. Has society created a subconscious immune system against deep thought? Like a body rejecting a foreign object, society develops psychological antibodies, ridicule, labeling, censorship, to neutralize those who challenge the status quo. We laugh at overthinkers. We call them too intense, too serious, or not fun. We dismiss them with words like conspiracy theorist or pretentious. All of these are subtle ways to say, stop thinking so much. You're making us uncomfortable. But what if those very thinkers are the ones we need the most? What if their discomforting insights are the only hope for breaking cycles of ignorance, manipulation, and self-deception? Have you ever been in a situation where speaking your truth felt risky? Do you remember a moment where you censored yourself just to fit in? Share your story in the comments. So, what happens when a person refuses to conform, refuses to trade truth for comfort? They become an outsider. Not in the sense of being exiled physically, but in a much deeper way. Emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. They walk through life with a strange sense of distance, as if everyone else is speaking a language they've chosen to unlearn. They are the ones who sit silently in crowded rooms, hearing the noise but craving something more, something real. They are the ones who question the celebration of mediocrity, the obsession with status, the compulsive chase for certainty. But here's the paradox. The world often treats deep thinkers as if they are broken, too sensitive, too serious, too intense. But in truth, it's not they who are broken. It's the system that's allergic to depth. Existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, "If you're lonely when you're alone, you're in bad company." For deep thinkers, solitude isn't just an escape, it's a necessity. It's the only place where the mind can breathe without being policed by superficiality. Yet this solitude often becomes a double-edged sword. It protects, but it also isolates. It clarifies, but it also cuts you off from the warmth of belonging. This is where many fall into the shadow trap, the belief that there is something wrong with being different, that maybe the price of being true to oneself is too high. Carl Jung called this the conflict between the persona and the self. The persona is the mask we wear to belong. The self is who we truly are. And between them lies the battlefield of individuation. When society punishes difference, many retreat. They shrink themselves, simplify their thoughts, or numb their sensitivity just to survive. But deep down, something within them aches. The soul knows when it's being silenced. Let's reflect. Have you ever felt the need to hide your thoughts because they were too much? Have you ever laughed at a shallow joke while your mind wandered somewhere far deeper? If so, you're not broken. You're navigating a world that has been structured to fear what you offer. Let's look at a modern fictionalized example. Elliot works at a high-end consulting firm. He's sharp, analytical, and deeply observant, but he never quite fits in. His questions make others uncomfortable. When he asks, "Why are we pushing this product that has no real benefit?" people roll their eyes. His co-workers call him too idealistic. His manager tells him to just focus on results. He begins to doubt himself. But outside the office, he writes essays, insightful, poetic, challenging. Strangers read them and say, "You put into words what I've always felt, but couldn't say." This is the paradox. In the system, he's too much. But outside the system, he's exactly what others have been starving for. The lesson: your thoughts may not always be welcomed, but that doesn't make them wrong. In fact, it may be proof that they are powerful, because true insight disrupts before it illuminates. It first breaks the illusion, then builds a new truth. So if you feel like an outsider, remember, you're not lost. You may simply be ahead of your time. If you believe that thinking deeply is a superpower, give this video a like, subscribe, and share it with someone who refuses to shrink. So how does one live as a deep thinker in a world that often punishes depth? That's the real question. You see, the challenge is not simply about being different. It's about staying rooted in that difference without becoming bitter, without collapsing, without hiding. Because the truth is, the world needs deep thinkers, not to lead movements or become martyrs, but to quietly realign the soul of society, piece by piece. So how do you protect your mind without building walls around your heart? The first step is recognizing the difference between being alone and being isolated. Alone is a space of reflection. Isolation is a wound. You need solitude, but you also need connection with those who see you, truly see you. Jung called this the collective individuation. The idea that true wholeness is not just individual, but shared. As you deepen your own awareness, you create ripples that awaken others. Your clarity becomes a mirror, showing others who they are beneath their roles and masks. But to get there, you must walk through the fire of rejection, ridicule, even betrayal. You must face the temptation to dim down, to become more palatable, more likable, more normal, and resist it. Because what the world calls too much is often the exact medicine it needs. Nietzsche once said, "And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music." Don't stop dancing, just change the room. Here's a brief story that might speak to you. A woman named Lara was always the odd one in her family. While others gossiped, she pondered. While others chased praise, she wrote poetry no one read. She was told to grow up, to be realistic, to stop dreaming. For years she tried to shrink, took a corporate job, mimicked small talk, numbed herself. But the ache only grew. One day, she quit. She moved to a small town, opened a tiny studio, and began teaching writing to teenagers who had been told their voices didn't matter. She gave them what she never received: space to feel, to question, to create. Now, years later, she's still unknown to the world. But to those kids, she changed everything. That is the power of living in truth, not for applause, but for impact. So if you too feel like a Lara or an Elliot, if your truth has made you lonely, don't despair. You're not here to entertain. You're here to remind people what it means to feel deeply, think freely, and live authentically. And as more of us rise, unashamed of our depth, something profound begins to happen. The culture shifts. The shallow becomes hollow, and the quiet ones finally take the stage. Not with noise, but with presence. Has your depth ever been treated like a weakness? What did it cost you? And what did it teach you? Share your story below. And if this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. We're building a space where deep minds belong.